Coming up on Bridge City News. Due to COVID-19, more Remembrance Day ceremonies are going virtual, including here in Lethbridge. A new survey suggests to get the coronavirus under control, many Canadians would be in favor of a temporary curfew. And U.S. President Donald Trump has alleged more voter fraud as lawsuits have been launched in connection with the presidential election. Political correspondent Lisa Daftari has the latest.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Ottawa will spend $20 million to help veterans organizations continue to serve during the COVID-19 pandemic. Veterans Affairs Minister Lawrence MacAulay says groups are hurting and vets need the help they provide.
Tomorrow, we will mark Remembrance Day. Canadians would normally gather at cenotaphs across the country to pay tribute to those who fought for our freedom. People would gather at local Royal Canadian Legions to thank the heroes who kept this country strong and free. But this year will be different. COVID-19 means many ceremonies are online. Many veterans are staying at home. And too many of the legions that provide support for them are facing tough times themselves. Our veterans served Canada with honor and valor. They stepped up for us, and now we must step up for them.
Remembrance Day ceremonies across the country are being pushed online this year. In an effort to keep people safe during the COVID-19 pandemic, the Lethbridge Legion and the City of Lethbridge are doing the same. As for the annual flyover during Remembrance Day, it'll look a little different this year. Lethbridge resident Jeffrey Brain will be conducting this year's flypass across Lethbridge, Coaldale and Raymond. A small ceremony will be held at the Lethbridge Cenotaph downtown. Retired Warrant Officer Glenn Miller says you can still stream online and hopes Lethbridge will rally to support our troops.
Because of those seniors who are locked down in their facilities that would normally attend, this is another way for them to be virtually present. But it also opens up for those people from the Lethbridge area who are across Canada and the world a chance to tune in virtually. But this happens all across Canada, and nationally there's also the national service, which would be 2 hours ahead in Alberta. People can watch the national ceremony as well. As a veteran, I look to see how many people are wearing a poppy. The campaign has been on for a number of days now, and less than 5% of the people are wearing poppies. So as a veteran, that shows me that they're not really thinking of veterans. It's only on Remembrance Day, but this is Veterans Week.
The online stream can be found on the Lethbridge Legion's Facebook page. With Remembrance Day taking place tomorrow, a local church is paying tribute to 12 men who gave their lives during the First World War. As video journalist Micah Quinn explains, it involves a 100-year-old church organ and people who want to pay tribute to those who made the ultimate sacrifice.
This is the 100-year anniversary for this pipe organ at the Southminster United Church. Back when it was built in 1920, members of the congregation donated the funds to build the organ. This was done in memory of 12 men from the Lethbridge district that fought and died in World War I.
So our church was only 1 year old when the First World War broke out. So we had a generation of young men that went to fight overseas in Europe during that conflict. So it is quite a fabulous organ, so I'm told. I'm not too musically aware of these things, but apparently it's like one of the best in Western Canada.
Southminster United Church held a Remembrance Day ceremony on November 8th, where they discussed the 12 men from Lethbridge who fought in the Great War.
Those 12 young men that I had mentioned, and just our general feelings about Remembrance Day, the desire for peace in our world, but also remembering those who unfortunately were required to give the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom.
Reverend Croissant says Remembrance Day holds a special meaning for the church and himself.
Yeah, I would say like one thing that I shared on Sunday, as I said, when I was a kid in church, we'd ask people on Remembrance Sunday to stand up if they were veterans of the war. And when I was younger, it was many people that were from the World War II generation.
The organ was installed in 1920 at a cost of $17,090. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Members of the RCMP who have a minimum of 3 years of active service can now qualify to receive a veteran's license plate. The expanded eligibility criteria includes active and honorably discharged members of the RCMP to align with the Royal Canadian Legion's definition of a veteran. The province's others who can receive veterans plates include Alberta residents who have been released from the Canadian Armed Forces, those who are currently serving in the Armed Forces for a minimum of 3 years, and police officers who served under NATO or the United Nations. To date, more than 28,000 veterans' license plates have been dished out in Alberta. With COVID-19 numbers rising in Lethbridge, the province has put our city on a watch list. Now, there allegedly has been talk as well of a potential curfew for our city to help stop the spread of the virus. Now, it's nothing official just yet. The city now has just under 200 active COVID-19 cases. A recent poll by Leger and the Association for Canadian Studies says close to 67% of Canadians would back a temporary nighttime curfew from 10 p.m. till 5 a.m. to curb viral spread or to curb house parties. 55% of respondents aged 18 to 34 said they would support a curfew. Around 75% of those aged 55 would endorse it, and 80% of those over the age of 65 said yes to a temporary curfew. Residents in Alberta, Ontario, and Quebec, however, were less inclined to support a curfew. The government of Alberta says our province saw an increase of 713 COVID-19 cases today. That means there are now 8,090 novel coronavirus cases in Alberta. Fortunately, 26,407 people have recovered from the virus. The Calgary zone still leads the way with 3,434 active cases. The Edmonton zone is next with 3,255 active cases. Here in the South Zone, we currently have 488 active cases. In Lethbridge, there are 198, and in Lethbridge County, meanwhile, has 71. The province of Manitoba has gone into code red as it deals with rising COVID-19 numbers. Manitoba's top doctor says he has talked with Premier Brian Pallister about potentially closing non-essential businesses. The province is reporting 365 new cases today, 3 more deaths, and a total of 192 people in hospital. Public health officials say there's an increasing demand on the health system, and the province is at a critical tipping point. Tougher restrictions have already been announced in Winnipeg and the Southern Health Region, but officials warn more restrictions may be coming very soon. Lethbridge City Council held a Finance Committee meeting on Monday. The City Treasurer shared that COVID-19 will likely force the city into making 5 to 10% cuts in each department. Councillor Rob Miyashiro says this round of budget deliberations could be their most challenging yet.
I don't know if there's been a tougher budget process that I've been a part of since I've been a city councillor, whether it's CIP or budget. This is changing. This could change what we do in people's lives, and I don't say that facetiously. If we cut transit this much, or if we cut something else this much, what effect does that have on the residents of Lethbridge? And so we need to take this very seriously, and we need to weigh out everything and really go in with an open mind and think of how we can balance out all of this and still have it function properly for the citizens of Lethbridge.
Deliberations also revealed that City Council is looking at a potential freeze on property taxes for next year. The Alberta Union of Provincial Employees is looking for a 5% pay raise for public sector workers. Now, the UCP government, meanwhile, is asking those workers to take a 4% pay cut. Vice President of the AUPE, Kevin Barry, says he's not surprised by the news from the province. He said the union will continue to fight for workers, and he adds that these frontline workers deserve a raise due to the hardships of what they deal with in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic.
You know, here we see the UCP government asking folks who have been working hard during the pandemic, in social services, income supports, sheriffs keeping people safe in COVID-19, and guards in facilities and throughout the province, and the UCP is just showing that they really don't care for workers in the province, and they want government workers to pay for the pandemic, it seems like.
The AUPE represents more than 90,000 public sector workers, and 22,000 of them are directly employed by the government. Alberta Finance Minister Travis Toews says the union must be part of the solution to get the province's close to $100 billion debt under control. He notes that Premier Jason Kenney, MLAs, and most recently political staff have all taken pay cuts, so now it's the public sector's turn. In a statement, Minister Toews had this to say: "Compensation is the government's largest expense and represents more than half of operating expenses. The government is committed to delivering core government services more cost-effectively to ensure those services are sustainable into the future." The Lethbridge Fish and Game Association has begun construction, and an effort is being made to make the facility one of the safest sports ranges in the country. Video journalist Ainsley O'Reilly explains why firearm education is so important in our community.
Press the trigger. Okay, how did that feel?
Lethbridge Fish and Game gets excited when someone like myself, who's never shot a firearm, does it for the first time. The association's president, Alan Friesen, is passionate about safety.
It's a great satisfaction to introduce somebody to the safest sport that exists.
Since 1986, there have only been 2 incidences, both which didn't cause bodily harm, where the cartridge or projectile left the range. The facility is about to undergo a construction project to enhance its safety practices by working with the city and adapting the no blue sky approach.
We're going to build up the berms. We're going to put in backstops to trap bullets and all that. We're going to put in air baffles. We're going to put ground baffles in so that when somebody's standing at a shooting line ready to fire, all they're going to be able to see is a target.
Friesen is excited about the opportunities the range will have for larger sporting events, while giving people who are new to the sport their first shot.
That's amazing. There's no other sports facility that has that level of safety. But we're going to go one step further to be the absolute best world-class safety on the projectiles.
For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
The city of Regina has elected its first female mayor. Sandra Masters, who served as board chair of the Regina Exhibition Association, defeated the incumbent Michael Fougere in yesterday's election. In 1988, Doreen Hamilton served as interim mayor for 6 weeks following the resignation of Larry Schneider, but was not elected. Masters ran on a campaign that indicated change was needed and that Regina needed to move forward. There are world leaders, including Mexico's president, who refuse to recognize Joe Biden as U.S. president-elect, at least not until the courts have their say. U.S. political correspondent Lisa Daftari says the Trump administration is standing firm that there was in fact election fraud in the U.S. presidential election.
Many of these states that were outstanding have still not yet given their final answer, their projected winner. So you can understand why there is so much confusion, chaos. Obviously, the media, the mainstream media, continues on with its belief that Joe Biden is the winner. Joe Biden's campaign has put out statements. They made basically a victory speech. But on the Trump side, there are still a lot of claims that there was election fraud, that allegedly votes were put aside, that votes were burned. I'm hearing things like some people were asked to use permanent marker on their ballots so that their ballots would be tossed out.
Lisa will also talk about a Republican senator who is saying that Trump should not concede defeat, in part because Republicans will never again be able to elect another president from their party. That's coming up after business news. Georgia's voting system implementation manager called elections imperfect and said that some people did in fact vote illegally. Gabriel Sterling blamed human error and not machines, but said the results should not be affected.
We are going to find that people did illegally vote. That's going to happen. There are going to be double voters. There are going to be people who did not have the qualifications of a registered voter to vote in this state. That will be found. Is it 10,353? Unlikely. But every election, as I've said, I think every day at this podium, is imperfect. The issue now is, with margins, we are the winner for the closest in the country at 0.2%. When the margins are this tight, every little thing matters. We understand that there's one side of this country that is ebullient. They're ecstatic. They're in the streets partying. I guess COVID's over. So then you have the other side, which are extremely upset. They're angry. They, in their heart of hearts, know in their gut that something terrible happened and their guy lost and it's not fair. And when you're this close and the emotions run this high, it's understandable.
The man who many say won the election, Joe Biden, is imploring Americans to wear a mask to help fight the spread of the novel coronavirus. Biden spoke as COVID-19 cases surpassed 10 million in the United States.
As we work toward a safe and effective vaccine, we know the single most effective thing we can do to stop the spread of COVID is wear a mask. The head of the CDC warned this fall that for the foreseeable future, A mask remains the most potent weapon against the virus.
The U.S. has also seen just over 1.2 million deaths attributed to COVID-19. Pharmaceutical company Pfizer says an early peek at its vaccine data suggests that shots may be 90% effective at preventing the novel coronavirus. This is the first peek behind the curtain, says Paul Dubrix, who's the director of Pittsburgh Center for Vaccine Research.
Does this mean that COVID is cured? Because you hear a number like 90%. No. Does this mean that this will be the best vaccine? No. Does this mean that this vaccine will provide immunity for years and years and years, like measles vaccine that we know gives us lifelong immunity? No. What we know today from this very limited analysis is we have started to make progress in using a candidate vaccine and seeing a reduction in disease.
There appears to be a shift in the mindset of many young people in North America who may be warming up to socialism. Now that's according to Dr. Jeff Myers, president of Summit Ministries in Colorado. Dr. Myers, who mentors many youth, says the idea of embracing socialism can be quite dangerous.
The problem with the socialist worldview is that it's based on Marxism, which is based on materialism. Only the material world exists. There's no heaven, there's no hell, there's no God, no Jesus, no Holy Spirit, nothing outside of the material world. It's the physical world. You have trees, then you have wealth. You have mines, then you have wealth. And if there's only so much to go around and one person has more, that means they stole it. So it's not wrong to take it back from them because they stole it in the first place.
Catch the entire interview with Dr. Myers and Jeanette Rocher coming up in the second half of our program. It was great to see that so many of the Priority 1 roads have now been plowed in Lethbridge with all of the snow we've seen recently, and the snow will continue for the short term, but full weather details are coming up shortly. It was nice to see the temperature warm up a little to melt so much of the snow we've received. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a complete look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, we'll be receiving more snow, but then things should be clearing up.
Yeah, well, things won't clear up until around tomorrow afternoon. We'll be seeing periods of snow later into this evening. We could see up to 2 centimeters of snow overnight. Overnight low -8 degrees. And then as we kick off Remembrance Day, we'll be seeing light periods of snow in the morning. That should be clearing up around noon tomorrow, though, giving us a mix of sun and cloud for the rest of our Remembrance Day. -7 the high tomorrow, -13 overnight low. And then as we get into Thursday, that's when we will see the sunshine again. 1 degrees will be the high for Thursday, 2 degrees on Friday under sunny skies, and then a mix of sun and cloud expected for our weekend, Saturday and Sunday. 4 degrees the high on Saturday, 3 for Sunday, and Monday will kick us out with a 2 degrees there. Now, the almanac tells us that the average high this time of year should be around 5 degrees, so we're not quite there yet. Maybe by the weekend we'll be almost there. -6 the average low. 19 degrees was our high temperature. That was back at 1941, and we had our chilliest day on record in 1995. It was -25. Sun rose this morning at 7:36 a.m. and our sun set this evening just before 5 p.m. right at 4:55 p.m. So we're in that 4 o'clock hour for the sunsets, unfortunately, meaning winter's coming. So let's take a look at what's happening tomorrow for the highs. On the west coast, Victoria, 8 degrees. 6 degrees in Vancouver with a mix of sun and cloud. -7 in Edmonton, -6 in Calgary tomorrow with a mix of sun and cloud. Now Edmonton is going to see an overnight snowfall that should be clearing up by the morning though. -10 in Saskatoon, -7 Regina. These temperatures are going to feel a lot colder though, especially in the morning with that wind chill. 60% chance of flurries across the rest of the prairies tomorrow in Saskatchewan and Manitoba as well. Now, this is where the temperatures have been a lot warmer this week. In fact, Hamilton was the hotspot in Canada today. But tomorrow they're going to be seeing rain showers. Still nice temperatures though in Ottawa, 23, 22 in Montreal, 15 over in Toronto. And as we look further east into Atlantic Canada, 19 degree day in Fredericton there. Same thing for Halifax with a mix of sun and clouds, 17 in Charlottetown. And St. John's, Newfoundland could see a bit of wind tomorrow with a high of 7 degrees. So there you go. That is your forecast.
Global stocks and U.S. futures rose for the second day in a row on hopes for progress toward a potential coronavirus vaccine. Analysts say it may allow the world to revive manufacturing, shipping, and a normal life. Investors were enthusiastic after Pfizer announced that early data on a vaccine under development might suggest it might be 90% effective at preventing COVID-19, though that does not mean its release is imminent. A former federal Conservative cabinet minister says he expects Joe Biden to follow through on a pledge to kill the Keystone XL pipeline if or when he becomes president. John Baird says Biden's environmental agenda will help Canadian energy companies better compete with their American rivals. Analysts say Biden will likely cancel the pipeline's permit, most likely before next summer's construction season. They say that will mean lost opportunities to attract billions of dollars in investment capital and will likely further workforce reductions in the energy sector. Ottawa is in the process of finalizing funding commitments to both General Motors and Fiat Chrysler. This comes after announcing a $295 million investment in Ford earlier this year. Union leaders at Unifor previously announced the Liberal government's commitment to the three automakers. They each announced more than $1 billion in investments for Canadian plants as part of collective bargaining agreements. Government officials say they're waiting for the ratification of the union deals, which ended yesterday, before finalizing dollar amounts. The European Union says it will impose tariffs on up to $4 billion US worth of American goods and services over illegal aid for plane maker Boeing. It also expressed hope that trade ties would improve if US President Donald Trump leaves office. European trade ministers agreed on the move a few weeks after arbitrators gave the EU the green light for such punitive action. The World Trade Organization had deemed some US support for Boeing illegal, which is a bitter rival to Europe's Airbus. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 139 points on the day to finish at 16,615. The Dow was up 262 points to 29,420. The S&P 500 was down 4 points to 3545, and the Nasdaq was down 159 points to 11,553. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.50 to $41.79 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 9 cents to $2.95 US. Gold was down a cent to $18.7732 US an ounce, and silver was unchanged at $24.23 US an ounce. Wheat is at $265 per metric ton. Barley's also at $265. Canola's at $5.55, and corn is at $276 per metric ton. Live cattle were up 5 cents to $111.88. Feeder cattle were down 33 cents to $140.40, and lean hogs were down 48 cents to $65.13. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 76.76 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Remembrance Day ceremonies across the country are being pushed online. That's in an effort to keep people safe during the COVID-19 pandemic. The Lethbridge Legion and the City of Lethbridge are doing the same. A small ceremony with select people will be held, however, at the Lethbridge Cenotaph downtown. Retired Warrant Officer Glenn Miller says that you can still stream online and hopes the community will rally to support the troops. The online stream can be found on the Lethbridge Legion's Facebook page. Apparently, more and more young people today are buying into the socialism ideology. Dr. Jeff Myers with Summit Ministries in Colorado says that is a very dangerous mindset. Here are his thoughts with Jeanette Roche coming up shortly. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. The Big Christmas Farmers Market is taking place November 13th and 14th at Exhibition Park in Lethbridge. Find great gift ideas and a big selection of holiday baking from over 150 vendors. Admission is free. Non-perishable food items and cash donations for local food banks are gratefully accepted. COVID-19 measures will be observed to ensure your safety. For more information, visit lethbridgefarmersmarket.ca and click on Big Christmas. The Lethbridge Senior Citizens Organization is looking for volunteers to take part in their Drive Happiness program. This program is to help seniors in our community who are facing extreme loneliness due to lack of accessible transportation. Volunteers will drive clients to their medical appointments, pick up groceries, and take them to important life activities. If you're interested in this opportunity, for more information, call 403-332-4320 or email volunteer@volunteerlethbridge.com. Do you or someone you love struggle with a gambling problem? Is it causing chaos to your life and relationships? Gamblers Anonymous holds weekly meetings on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. and Thursdays at 6 at 408 13th Street North. For more information, call 403-331-0822 or visit albertaga.net. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Many Christians in the U.S. got actively involved to influence the presidential election to get a government elected that would uphold biblical principles. However, today's guest suggests that unless something changes in the way young people view the world, future elections might not produce a very godly government. We're joined by Dr. Jeff Myers, president of Summit Ministries based out of Colorado and author of Unanswered Questions, available at summit.org. Jeff Myers, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Yeah, glad to be with you.
All right. So, Dr. Myers, can you first of all just tell us a little bit about yourself and your ministry, maybe your background?
You bet. Summit Ministries is a training program for young adults that equips them, a rising generation, to embrace God's truth and to champion a biblical worldview. That's the heart of what we do. So we are wanting to train leaders for our nation who think biblically. The program has been in existence for 58 years. I've had the privilege to be the president for 9 years. I attended as a student way back in the day when I was considering graduating high school and considering leaving the church. Came to a Summit Ministries 2-week-long training program. Founder David Noble. I said to him, "I hope you have a lot of answers, but I have a lot of questions." I was so arrogant. And he said to me, "At Summit, we aren't afraid of questions." And I realized I was in the community of people where I could really ask the tough questions about my faith and about the world and everything else. For the first time, I felt like I found a place as a Christian in our age.
Okay, so that's amazing. Now, you spend a lot of time mentoring youth and training up youth leaders, but you say that there's not much of a difference right now between the way young adults who are in the church think about the world compared to young adults who aren't in the church. So can you give us maybe some examples of this?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. I feel privileged to work with about 40,000 young people here. These are pretty intensive programs, so it's a lot of mentoring. A few years ago, I began that young adults in the church and young adults outside of the church were very little different. So, for instance, 69% of church-going young adults today say they believe there are no absolute truths, that they are the ones who decide for themselves what is right and what is wrong. Then another thing began to emerge when socialism began to really reemerge as a force in our nation. So many young adults were telling me, "Oh yeah, I think it's a great idea. I really love it." And we did some studies on this and found that young adults are 5 times as likely to have a Marxist worldview as their older counterparts in church. So in both social areas, and in political and economic areas, they have decided, I am the one who decides what is right and wrong. I'm the one who decides what is true, right? So you take those things and put them together, and you end up in some really weird conversations. I would have a conversation with someone and I would say, "Well, that's not what socialism is. Look at all the failures." And they say, "But I'm the one who decides what is true for me. And so I know what I want socialism to be. Therefore, that's what it is."
Interesting. So you're saying that socialism is becoming kind of more of a view of the young people. So far left socialism used to be frowned upon by the average American. So what's changed and why? Is it just kind of that viewpoint of the younger generation, do you think?
I think it is. The younger generation didn't have the experience that I had growing up. Now, if you go back in American history to the 1920s and 1930s, socialism was very popular. Even far left radical socialism was very popular. Fascism became popular in the United States of America. Adolf Hitler had his admirers here, even people who were working in the presidential administration, because they thought that guy knows how to get things done, right? So what happened after World War II is the rise of international communism. And in China and in the Soviet Union and in other places, there was wholesale slaughter of people, to the point where one scholar said possibly up to 360 million people have been killed at the hands of their own government in the 20th century. 360 million people. It's wholesale slaughter in the 20th century. I saw that, right? So I remember being in high school and seeing videos of parades of military equipment and realizing the Soviet Union has enough nuclear weapons to destroy the world 15 times over. None of the young adults I'm working with have ever had that experience. As far as they know, socialism is just what, respectable countries in Scandinavia do. And so it's really no problem at all. We should have more of that here. They don't see the tie-in between the Marxist ideology and the socialist mindset.
Interesting. So is there any way that, do you think that almost the definition of socialism could change just based on the new world viewpoint of it? Is that a possibility?
Well, keep in mind, you've got an entire generation of young people who think that whatever they want to have happen is what is true. So they don't believe that Bernie Sanders is a person who does whatever he does. He's whatever they want him to, based on how they feel about themselves. So they don't. So I think the problem with the socialist worldview is that it's based on Marxism, which is based on materialism. Only the material world exists. There's no heaven, there's no hell, there's no God, no Jesus, no Holy Spirit, nothing outside of the material world. It's the physical world. You have trees, then you have wealth. You have mines, then you have wealth. And if there's only so much to go around and one person has more, that means they stole it. So it's not wrong to take it back from them because they stole it in the first place. What the young adults I'm working with today have completely missed is that wealth grows through good ideas, through innovation, through inspiration. So a lot of what we do at Summit Ministries is not just trying to say, hey, you believe this about socialism, that's bad. We say, here is what a mindset based on scripture could lead us to. Great ideas, innovation, inspiration, opportunities to overcome problems, not just by redistributing wealth, but by changing everything in the way we operate based on a biblical worldview. We try to give them that vision.
Where are today's youth getting these ideas from?
Mostly social media, and I know this because this last summer we did our programs virtually and we did a lot of polls. So I have polls from hundreds and hundreds of students, and I asked them, where do you think most people get their ideas? And about 65 or so percent say people get their ideas from social media. 1% get their ideas from church. 1%. So next to social media, it's friends. Next to friends, it's family or the news, something like that. But the church has almost no influence on these young adults, and these are mostly Christian young adults we're talking about.
And are they not learning the proper history in school?
I don't think I guarantee you they're not getting a proper history in school because I have reviewed all of the textbooks. And it's woefully inadequate in explaining anything from the standpoint of reality, not necessarily from a biblical view, but just what is real? How do we know? I mean, how could somebody look at a country like the Soviet Union and say, oh, I guess Marxism's really not that bad? How could they look at China or Venezuela even and say, oh, it's not really that bad? I mean, you have to decide it ahead of time that you're going to be a deceiver when you write that textbook in order to come up with the kinds of things that people have come up with.
Wow. Okay, so you mentioned before that statistics show that 69% of evangelical youth who attend church don't believe in absolute truth, right? And you agree that these young people are believing now that if their beliefs offend someone, then their beliefs might be wrong, right? So why do you think that absolute truth matters?
I think absolute truth matters in the world of ideas in the same way that gravity matters in the world of physics. You have to take it into account. I just love seeing the picture of that water tower grill. I want to go there and eat sometime. But if I decided I'm going to stand up on that thing and I'm going to jump off, I'm going to just jump off of the edge. The law of gravity says that I will go down, not up. Even if I feel like I want to go up, I'm going to go down, not up. You don't break the law of gravity, you just prove the law of gravity, right? In the same way, the idea of a moral absolute truth is that truth does exist. Justice is a real thing. It's not just something that is a concept that I can have if I can make myself more powerful. that love is a real thing, that the kingdom of God exists, that spiritual realities are just as real as physical realities. That's at the heart of a biblical worldview. It's also at the heart of a generally philosophical worldview. I did a doctorate in philosophy. That was my academic training. And philosophers all get this, but very few other people do. So absolutely recognize that there is truth and you are not it, is at the heart of living a good life.
Okay. And you were saying that apparently only 19% of church-going, born-again Christians have that biblical worldview. So how would you define a biblical worldview?
Well, a biblical worldview is a pattern of ideas that starts with God exists. Because God exists, we can know what is real. Because we can know what is real, we can know what is right and what is wrong. Because we can know what is right and what is wrong, we can know how to form a flourishing society. We can know how to be mentally healthy, so forth. And it applies to every area of life. It starts with Jesus Christ. That Jesus is at the center of it all, and everything else, as John Stott said, is circumference. When you start with that Jesus is at the heart of it, Jesus was the creator of the world, you actually, even though you're starting off with things that people say, that's just so crazy, you're talking about miracles and all of that. But if you start off with that, you end up with a view of the world that is more reasonable, rational, intelligent, and true than if you take a worldview based on, say, secular or materialist assumptions. That's how I define it.
And then what about unbiblical views? Can those be turned around?
I think unbiblical views can be turned around if we recognize what they are. So, for instance, a worldview that's very influential in my country and in yours is the worldview of secularism. Secularism essentially says, look, there may be a God, probably not. People who believe in him are crazy, but they have the freedom to do it. But even if God does exist, he's not relevant to anything else that is important. It's not relevant to how we live our lives, not relevant to our culture, programs we produce on television, governments that we have at the local, provincial, federal level, or whatever else. God is not relevant. So a lot of believers embrace that worldview implicitly, say, oh, sure, well, yeah, I believe in God, and I have an experience with him every Sunday morning, but that doesn't affect anything else. That mindset has got to shift. We realize that God is not just something that we add on to our lives, that if what he says in the Bible is true, then it becomes the basis for everything else.
Now, you'd mentioned that culture is influencing our youth today. So what advice do you have for parents?
My main advice for parents is you want to be sure you're helping your children get a training in the worldview. You should assume that they have questions that they have not found good answers to about their faith. How do we know there really is a God? How do we know that the world is created rather than it just evolved through random chance processes? How do we know that Jesus really did rise from the dead? How could there be a good God if there is evil in the world? Every young adult I know is asking those kinds of questions. And if they aren't getting answers in church, then they're going to assume it's because the church doesn't have the answers. You've got to train them in a biblical worldview. We can help. Summit Ministries, summit.org. There are a lot of other organizations too that will help you. Apologetics and worldview training are a big part of. There's a lot of programming on the internet. There are a lot of ways that you can get that training for your kids, but I believe it's absolutely vital today.
Yeah. So what would you say to parents who have teens who are simply not interested in what the parents have to say, not interested in listening to them, what they're trying to teach them?
Oh, but that doesn't actually happen. Just sorry. Yeah. So what do you do if your children are not interested? I think you have the conversation with them that you would have if you were trying to get them to, say, stop using drugs, and say, in your current situation, you may not see everything that you need to see for the future of your life. I want to be walking alongside of you, helping you. I need you to trust me that this is something we need to do. So many parents will tell me, I sent my child to a Summit Ministries program for 2 weeks. They did not want to go. 2 or 3 days later, they called and said, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. Thank you. At this point, you have to learn to be a parent because your children have friends and their friends may not be leading them in the right direction. Just having you as their friend is not enough. You've got to be the one to say, look, I can see farther down the road because I've been there through my own mistakes and through things that I did right. And I need to give you this direction.
Right. So it's very important for parents to know who their children are befriending and perhaps even intervene, right, if to discourage them from befriending them. So how do you do that? Especially for the older kids.
I think for the older kids, I continued to try to find new friend groups for my kids. So I'd get them involved in different activities. We'd get together with those families, part of it. If I noticed there was a child at school that my son was a friend with, then I would get to know that family and have them over and do different things. So it's all part of building the community. When friends go bad, it's because our children are developing friendships that are outside of any kind of a positive community. We have to be the ones to create that. You can't just assume that the person who lives down the block, because it's a nice little neighborhood, also has the same values that you have. You've got to get to know them and have those discussions and talk. Essentially, you're discipling other people, even as you're discipling those who influence your children.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Jeff Myers, it looks like we are running out of time here, but Dr. Jeff Myers, president of Summit Ministries based out of Colorado and author of Unquestioned Answers. You can find that at summit.org along with many other resources, as you were saying, right? Thank you so much for being with us today.
Absolutely. Happy to do it.
U.S. President Donald Trump is refusing to concede the election, even though Joe Biden is the projected winner. Now, many in the mainstream media are already calling Biden president-elect and Kamala Harris vice president-elect. Now, apparently the Trump campaign has been hinting to some voter fraud, which is why he refuses to give up, and lawsuits have been launched. To talk about this in more detail is U.S. political correspondent Lisa Daftari joining me from Los Angeles. Lisa, there are also claims saying that the CIA allegedly colluded with the Democrats to create some voting software which would convert votes for Trump into votes for Biden in many of the battleground states. What have you heard? Is this really just a conspiracy theory?
There's a lot of theories going on around, and both sides claiming victory, believing that their candidate got more votes. Now, remember, the mainstream media has projected Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as the winners. Many of these states that were outstanding have still not yet given their final answer, their projected winner. So you can understand why there is so much confusion, chaos. Obviously, the mainstream media, continues on with its belief that Joe Biden is the winner. Joe Biden's campaign has put out statements. They made basically a victory speech. But on the Trump side, there are still a lot of claims that there was election fraud, that allegedly votes were put aside, that votes were burned. I'm hearing things like some people were asked to use permanent marker on their ballots so that their ballots would be tossed out. In Michigan, I'm sure you heard about the scenario where 138,000 or so approximately ballots were allegedly found, and 100% of them went to Joe Biden, meaning if you apply the half of them or 60% of them or even 70% of them went to Joe Biden, it's truly amazing that not even one of them would have gone to President Trump. So there are a lot of theories going on. The one that you pointed to with there being actually software that would help change the votes from a Trump vote to a Biden vote. That's another one that's allegedly been stated. So it's crazy, it's chaotic. And of course, the Trump campaign is moving forward with lawsuits because they believe that they have the necessary evidence to show that there was in fact voter fraud, and that they should have a recount, and they should really investigate further as to some of these practices where observers weren't let in, or how votes were counted, etc.
Lisa, they should consider making a Hollywood movie after all of this is said and done, right? Republican Senator Lindsey Graham says Trump should not concede defeat in the 2020 presidential election, in part because Republicans will never, ever be able to elect another president from their party ever again.
Yeah, well, Lindsey Graham definitely has a significant platform, and that's why he was quoted as saying such. But this is the belief of many people who claim that this has to be further investigated. Meaning, if Trump backs down, believing that that there was fraud and cheating going on the other side, it's going to change the course of history in our country. It's going cheating or fraud will become the norm, and more importantly, it will be a very bad or poor lesson for young conservatives who will feel defeated, who will feel like, it's not even worth trying when the other side's going to cheat. And it will really put a damper on the momentum that the party has gained over the last 4 years under the Trump presidency. I mean, it really deserves a moment to stop and say, well, we didn't have a blue wave. Joe Biden didn't kick this out of the park. It was actually extremely close, which means half this country, approximately or so, voted for President Trump. And because of that, the Republicans, many of whom believe the way Lindsey Graham does, that this deserves a fighting chance, that we have to preserve the future and the reputation of the Republican Party.
Mexico will not comment on the Biden victory until all of the election legal issues are complete. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, it's amazing covering foreign policy at this moment. It's extremely interesting to see the reaction of foreign leaders around the world to this election that was called in favor of Joe Biden. You have Mexico, and remember all of this beef between Mexico and the United States, which was conjured up again by the mainstream media to say that Donald Trump wants to build a wall, and he is just hated by the Mexican people and Mexican leadership. But here you have some loyalty. The Mexican president saying that he will not congratulate Joe Biden until we have some more clarity on the issue, until all of the lawsuits are settled, and this is all we get a final answer, so to speak. So it's interesting to see that. And if you want to juxtapose this reaction to the ones of the mullahs in Iran, who are very quick to congratulate Joe Biden and are already making a tall order for the U.S. to get back into the JCPOA, the nuclear deal, to get what they're calling reparations. We covered this today on the foreign desk, talking about what the United States owes Iran because of the Trump era policies. So they're waiting on a lot of things. We'll see.
Yeah, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau here in Canada congratulated what he says is President-elect Joe Biden. Also, the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, same thing. Now, Lisa, there is talk if Biden does become the next U.S. president that he may be asked to move the U.S. Embassy back to Tel Aviv. That cannot sit well with Israel.
It won't sit well with a lot of people. And if people are honest with themselves in this country, it shouldn't sit well with Democrats either. And I'll tell you why. Moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem was not a Republican idea, talking point of action. It has been a bipartisan dream to do so. Bill Clinton comes to mind as somebody who wanted to do that, but didn't have the guts to do so, frankly. And President Trump did. So if the Biden administration gets into the White House and they decide to do an about face on this particular issue, then we'll be confirmed, and then we'll know that what they're doing is out of spite to just do a 180 on all of Trump's policies, and to potentially go back to setting the Middle East to where it was under the Obama presidency. So for 8 years, we had a very, very awkward and awful relationship with Israel for no reason other than the fact that President Obama had an awful relationship with Bibi Netanyahu and took it out on Israel policy. Whether it was his ideology or if it was a personal issue is not important. What's important is the foreign policy that we had during those years. And if the Biden administration wants to take it there, well, it's going to be a lot of wins for the Palestinian people, who Kamala Harris has already said they want to start giving money back to the Palestinian people. Remember that they have the pay to slay programs, paying terrorists, suicide bombers to kill Jews. And this is what U.S. taxpayer money will go towards paying for. This is all very real. It's been about 48 hours since Joe Biden has been announced the winner by the mainstream media, and these are this is the agenda that they're discussing, and it's really a shame. It's a shame for the people of the Middle East, the freedom-loving people of the Middle East, and the world as a whole, I would say.
One of Israel's biggest adversaries, Iran, has weighed in on the U.S. election, calling it a spectacle. Iran's supreme leader mocked the process, saying it exposed the weakness in democracy, Lisa.
Well, let the Iranian leadership take any opportunity to, widen the rift or the wedge here between the two sides in the United States, to point out any weaknesses of the United States, and that's what they live for doing. In the meantime, the Trump administration is putting more sanctions on them, so it's fine. They're getting their answer back. And the reason I say that is because this regime has done everything in its power to abuse, the human rights back at home, to go against everything that they promised that they would do in the nuclear deal, and now they are making fun of the United States election, the same election that they tried to meddle in and interfere in just weeks ago, getting email addresses of people in swing states in order to try to influence the vote to favor Joe Biden. And now that Joe Biden won, they're ecstatic. They're hoping that they get their long Christmas wish list of items.
Iran's president has called on projected President-elect Joe Biden to compensate for past mistakes. What are some of those past mistakes?
Basically, that President Trump was in office. I think that's the mistake that they're referring to. For 4 years, President Trump put this pressure campaign on the Iranian regime, first withdrawing from the nuclear deal in May of 2018, and from there putting targeted and focused sanctions on the regime members, on the Revolutionary Guard, on sectors that pertained to weapons and cybersecurity, and really put the regime under a lot of pressure so that it would buckle and to discontinue from its weapons program. Obviously, they didn't like that. They were counting down the moments to get a Biden presidency because they were hoping for a time similar to that of President Obama, where they were given bags of cash. Relationship was normalized without any contingencies, without any requirements whatsoever with regards to their weapons program, with regards to human rights abuses, etc. So they're hoping to get another easy, free pass under the Biden administration.
Lisa, we saw the first flight to the United Arab Emirates carrying Israeli tourists, marking a historical moment. It looked to herald a new level of economic cooperation in the Middle East.
Yes, and we hope that this will continue regardless of who takes the White House come January. This is incredible. The Abraham Accords normalizing relations between the Arab states and Israel, not just a peace accord, because a peace accord many times has just been a meaningless piece of paper. This is an actual handshake that will signify trade, technology exchanges, tourism, COVID vaccine, apps, phone technology, so many things that will be truly meaningful for the lives of freedom-loving people in the Middle East, to warm up to Israel, to look at the Middle East and the future of the Middle East with new eyes, new perspective. And we hope that the Biden administration does not do an about-face on this particular notion. And we know that there are 5 other countries that are in line to do the same. And we hope that they continue and they will go forward to sign on as well.
Yeah, we need to see more peace in the Middle East. Lisa, the New York Times is reporting that China has offered Jamaica loans and expertise to build miles upon miles of new highways. It has also donated security equipment to military and police forces and built a network of Chinese cultural centers. Let me ask you something. Should we be concerned here in North America?
Absolutely, yes. And this is exactly what China has done all throughout the globe. We perhaps haven't been paying as much attention because it's been in places that are not as close, or we just haven't been paying attention, period. And it's nothing new. This is international news, and it's not something that the West really pays attention to, unfortunately. I think we all have our share of domestic issues to be focused on right now. But China does this. They go into places where they need economic help, they need infrastructure help, they need internet service, they need electrical wires and infrastructures. And what they do is they give them a loan. They agree to go in and fix their phone lines and electrical lines and bring in internet and do all these things while gaining access to information, to technology, to infrastructure, basically owning the people and putting their footprints here in the West, closer to the United States, closer to the Western Hemisphere. And to your original question, absolutely, this is something to keep an eye on. It is is increasing China's sphere of influence throughout the world. And of course, that is something to keep an eye on.
Let me ask you something, Lisa. If some of these votes, I want to circle back to the election for just a moment, do get overturned in favor of Trump, and Donald Trump does get reelected another 4-year term for the Trump administration, would we see a lot of riots in some of these Democratic states? Or maybe even would we see another civil war? That's what we're concerned about here in Canada, which will occur in the United States.
Yeah, it's concerning to everyone. Look, I live in Los Angeles. All the stores were boarded up on election day. It was a mandatory boarding up, particularly in nice areas like Rodeo Drive of Beverly Hills with all the luxury stores, all boarded up. The election has been called in favor of Joe Biden. We have not seen any looting, any protesting of with violence, I should say. There have been peaceful demonstrations, of course, and we're not seeing anything close to what we thought. Now, to your question, if this should be reversed, what will we see? Well, I do think we're going to see a lot of emotional people. We're going to see a lot of that looting and rioting that we saw because of the leadership in the Democrat Party, because of the social justice movements that have piggybacked their causes onto this particular decision, like Black Lives Matters, like many of those defund police movements. They, had an original cause, and now they have piggybacked upon this election cycle. So who knows what we're going to see? But what I can tell you, Hal, from being here in the United States, is that there's a lot of tension on the ground. There's a lot of tension neighbor to neighbor. And, it's very uncomfortable for people who voted for Donald Trump. They feel extremely vulnerable. They feel unsafe. They feel like the only place they can have this outlet is on social media platforms or with friends and WhatsApp chat groups, things like that. But, there's a tremendous rally here in Beverly Hills this past Saturday. A lot of people coming out, a lot of car parades going by with flags. People are upset, and they've been peacefully and in a very classy way showing that they are upset and they want this to be recounted or investigated further. On the other side, I don't know what's going to happen if this is overturned, but we hope for healing, we hope for unity, and I wish that the Democrats would have called for this healing and unity, the same healing and unity that they're calling for now. They would have called for it 4 years ago at the start of the Trump presidency.
A country divided, let's pray for peace. Lots of peace in your area there. Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Thank you, Lisa.
My pleasure.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless. Thanks so much for watching.